Hi and welcome to the first edition of Six String Corner, a new website run by me where I'm going to be talking to you about bands, guitars, artists and music that I like and hopefully you like too. So, the first album. Bam! Greg Howe's latest incarnation in the band Maragold. No, it's got nothing to do with rubber gloves, nothing to do with flowers. Although looking at Megan, yeah, I could probably come up with some idea what to do with those three things. But no, it's music, and it's great music. Very much going back to his time at the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, where he made two albums with his brother and the band that they had together at the time. Fantastic band, very much overlooked, like most bands were, that were good rock, shred. From that end of the 80s, early 90s period, as the scene and music industry started to change a little, and all of these musicians who'd been inspired by the generations of guitarists coming through had reached saturation really, and things had changed. But this album is a lovely, lovely, smooth combination of great rock, strong rhythm section, fantastic vocals that just blend with the music effortlessly. And on top of all of that, Greg's scintillating, unique, just mesmerizing signature sounds, tricks, licks, solo work, all the shred that you would expect of Greg Howe, but back a little to his more rocky roots, rather than the more sort of jazz fusion that we've seen from him over the last decade or so. Don't get me wrong, I love that stuff. I love Greg. I love everything he's put out. But the things he did with Albert, his brother, those were the two albums that I probably liked the most. And yeah, this is getting back to that. So it's a perfect synergy of those two fantastic things. Everything you could want from Greg, you know, elements that you just want to keep listening to over and over and over and over again, just thinking, oh my God, how does he do that? Those are all there. There's a great video that they put out a couple of months ago now, called Evergreen is Golder. Let me just make sure I get that right. Yeah. And more recently, Greg's put up a solo performance of the solo from Oracle, which is the fourth track on the album. And that's another just sparkling piece of work by him, as always. But for those of you who like that more, how can I put it, intricate, technical, fusion-like music that he's done, there is one track in particular that really stands out on this album for me that is partly that, but still a rock track, and that's Paradigm Tsunami. It's got some great dissonant notes in it. It's got some outstanding intricate work by Greg. I don't know where he gets it from. I mean, that brain of his just is from another planet. It really must be. But yeah, on the whole, I like this. I think anybody who likes Greg Howe, anybody who likes any of the stuff that inspired Greg, you know, Van Halen, and all those bands from the late 70s and early 80s, and all those shred guitarists, you can listen to this. And the first time I listened to it, I loved it. Um, and it just had me tapping my foot, nodding my head, you know, just, yeah, loving this. This is a good rock album, love this. And then I listened to it again, and I listened to it again, you know, as you do when you're cleaning the house, doing chores and all that kind of jazz. And then I sat down and I listened to it again, mostly in preparation for doing this. And it was then that the individual little bits of each of these songs started to stand out for me. Like the last track on the album, you can really hear the drums as an individual instrument. You can really hear the bass as an individual instrument. And it's just so spot on, so tight, so perfect. And I wonder how many takes they had to do to just nail that. But you really get a feel for how good the other members of the band are. Gianluca, Greg's worked with before. Kevin, Greg's worked with before. So they were both guys that Greg knew how to work with. He knew what they would bring to the band and the writing experience. Particularly Kevin. Kevin's got an awful lot of writing credits on this album. But what really excited me when I looked through the sleeve notes on this was that Albert helped write the first 2 tracks. He helped write the first single off the album. And Albert's a guy who is, or was, a fantastic vocalist, fantastic stage presence, fantastic performer, although I never got the chance to see him live. But he's still involved in the industry, but on the quiet side, you know. And maybe that's Greg's trademark. Is that, you know, there's a guy who's toured with Michael Jackson, toured with Justin Timberlake, played on Michael Jackson album, played on NSYNC, played P. Diddy. I heard he did some work with him. You know, he's quietly gone about being a fantastic session musician, highly regarded in the industry as just a fantastically gifted performer. And he's probably got the best out of everything in my mind. You know, I don't know it's hard work, but he's made money, he's made a living out of it, he's played with the best musicians in the world. Dennis Chambers, for one of them. My God, that guy's just phenomenal. And he's been able to write his own material, release his own material, tour the world, see the world as a musician. And he can still walk down the street, go buy a newspaper, a cup of coffee, and not have to deal with all of that crazy razzmatazz paparazzi that goes on in the world. And I know there's an awful lot of artists out there who would love to be able to live their life like that. And you know, I think probably one of the best examples of that was probably Steve Lukather. You know, early 80s. He was the session musician everybody wanted, and then, you know, he put together the band Toto, and they went on to just stratospheric success around the world. But Steve could still walk down the street, go buy a cup of coffee, and, you know, make a living out of the music industry, playing live, recording music, and still be a normal guy. Whereas, you know, you take Eddie Van Halen, that guy was hounded to the fucking gills, excuse me, by the press, by the media. He didn't help himself in that regard sometimes, but, you know, musicians get into this because they love the music, not because they're wondering, oh, can I deal with photographers? Well, whatever. Anyway, back to this album. I think it's fantastic. It is exactly what I had hoped that Greg would do again. I was lucky enough to meet Greg earlier this year and have a chat with him. And he said to me, you know, one of the main reasons that he did this album was that he wanted to get back to, sometimes you just want to tune out and just rock out, was the phrase he used to me. You know, I mean, all that technical virtuosity is fantastic, but sometimes, you know, after a long hard week, guys like you and me just want to have a beer, go to some club, go to some gig, and just rock our socks off. And that is exactly what he has delivered here. Now, one of the standout things about this album for me, having talked about Greg, having talked about Kevin, having talked about Gianluca and their fantastic musicianship, is you cannot ignore Megan's vocals. I have not heard a female vocalist of that strength, clarity, in a rock album. So just forever, man. Just forever. I mean, Laos from Germany, early 90s. She had fantastic voice, but that was it. God, I hope they do more. Please, please, please do another album. Don't let this be a one-off. Maybe even the Headpins. Going back that far from Canada, where, you know, Darby Mills. Yeah, Darby's the benchmark for me in terms of a female rock vocalist. You know, you can talk about Pat Benatar, maybe the Rocky Poppy, Alana Miles, but if you want a real ballsy female vocalist who can just belt it out and knock a crowd off its feet, Darby Mills, yeah, she's the one for me. But Megan, pretty damn close second, to be honest. And, you know, Megan's fresh, she's new, she's young, she's got a whole career ahead of her. She could foreseeably, you know, be knocking out vocals of that clarity and strength for probably the next 15, 20 years, before the vocal cords show their signs of abuse. And let's face it, you know, she's pretty nice to look at too. So she's going to get an awful lot of attention from the press, and I'm sure a lot of people will go to watch her because they like the look of her too. But to finish off, I would recommend buying this album. I think this is probably the best rock album I've heard for 2-3 years. And I think it certainly sets a standard for anything else to come this year. I'm really looking forward to Steel Panther's albums, not just because they're hilarious, and all of the, you know, goofing around that goes with them, but when you really get down to it, those guys can play. And Satchel, he's probably one of the best guitarists performing today. His technical ability is just absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, you only have to go onto YouTube, look up Steel Panther at their usual gig on Sunset Strip, and, you know, see some of the guest performers who've gone up on stage with them. And one that always springs to mind was George Lynch from Dokken, and George Lynch's, you know, Lynch Mob and all the stuff he's done since. And George is one hell of a player, And I always remember him standing up there and saying, I don't want to play with you. You always make everybody look stupid. You're going to make me look stupid because you're so good and we're just not at your level. And, you know, every time I listen to Greg, I get that same feeling, you know, that there are plenty of fantastic musicians out there. And then there are those few aliens, like Jeff Beck. You know, he was a real alien, and he still is, in that what he does is unique, and it is of such virtuosity. It's just, you can't, he has no contemporary that you can compare him to, because he is, how can I put it, a pioneer. You know, he came along at the birth of rock, guitar development, as an instrument, as a style of music, and he's been there through it, continually pushing himself and pushing the boundaries of what the instrument could do. I think Greg is very much in the same mould. He is unique. Some of the things that he's done are, you could probably find a few other jazz musicians out there who have produced this beautiful piece of work, but I wouldn't say any of them are any better. Not at all. And Greg's picked some very good musicians to work with on this album. But just to finish, I'm going to read you something from the sleeve notes that Megan wrote, which I thought was really, really nice. Now where are we? Here we go. Greg, Kevin and Gianluca. Every day I wake up and I can't believe that I get to play with the three of you. You are so freakishly talented. I love you guys. Thank you for taking a chance on me. And I'd say to everybody else out there, if you like Greg Howe, if you like, you know, great rock albums with scintillating guitar solos, take a chance on Maragold. Buy their album. If you're not convinced by me, I will put a link below to their first single, called Evergreen is Golder by Maragold, which is available on YouTube to watch. And I would also suggest watching Greg's little snippet of his solo from Oracle, one of the other tracks on the album, and judge for yourself. But yeah, so far, album of the year for me. Thank you for watching. See you next time, where I will be reviewing this album by a Danish artist called Søren Andersen. See you next time.